What makes us human? Is it our ability to express empathy, compassion, or perhaps our thirst for knowledge? Could it be our complex anatomy, fine-tuned over generations through the lens of evolution? Or quite possibly our desire to conquer by any means necessary? Regardless of what you think sets us apart from beast or fowl, we are unique. Created from scratch, from the ground up, a very specific genetic code, every fiber of which dictates our hair color, determines our height, and assigns our proclivity for intellect. Why would such a complex, superior being hunger for more? Are we not satisfied with sitting atop the food chain of an already vast and diverse ecosystem? Is it born from genuine care? Do we want to protect future generations from disaster? Supply organs to those who otherwise would not be able to obtain them? Stop sickness, disease, and famine? Or are we brewing something much more sinister? What would the world be like today if Stalin was successful in creating an army with the intelligence of men and the strength and agility of apes? How would healthcare change if someone needing a liver transplant could have one grown inside a pig? When will enough be enough? It's not so much a question of if, it's more a question of when. Just because we have the ability to do something does not mean we should. Regardless of your beliefs or preconceived notions, keep an open mind, pull up a chair, and enjoy our journey into the world of tomorrow and the alternate reality of yesterday. Is it science fiction, science fact, or just super normal?
The idea of a creature larger than a gorilla with an odor like a skunk might seem far-fetched.
From the beginning of his time on Earth, man has always been fascinated by monsters, real or imagined.
The outside world is very judgmental about these things, with many people not believing in them whatsoever.
Cloaked in secrecy, they show up without warning, state their business, then vanish as quickly as they appear.
They only land in isolated places. They have taken people, I believe. They do have technology.
But the idea is if enough people focus on something, like thousands and thousands of people focus their mind on something and the image, in a very strange way, they can kind of create a real world version of the fictional entity.
Fact, fantasy, and history have come together to tease the imagination.
That the truth will out, and that no one lie can live forever.
Welcome to SuperNRML. Welcome to SuperNRML. SuperNRML. I'm Sean the Fork Chop Forker tonight here recording with my friend, good friend, Vance Nesbitt, my friend Travis Quarter, and of course, everybody's favorite court jester, Maz Adams. James Baker, off somewhere in the Caribbean Sea on assignment. We don't know if he's ever coming back, but that's the chance you take when, well, you go on assignment. Guys, it's great to be here tonight. How are you doing, Vance? We'll start off with you.
I'm doing great. It's nice to be back in the comfy chair at the round table here with all you gents, as we like to say, gents. Let's use that term a lot. And Travis, how are you? Haven't chatted in a while.
We haven't. I'm feeling great, refreshed from a week off, and looking forward to talking about something new with you guys here tonight.
Ain't that something? Something new. And it is new. The hybrids. We're talking about hybrid creatures, something we've not talked about in the past. Our showrunner for this week is Maz, and he's going to take us into this really strange, bizarre, ethical, unethical topic. So, Maz, why don't you take it away, my friend?
I just want to know, how did I end up sitting in the corner at a circle table?
It's squared circles, you know, it happens.
All right, well, Be that as it may, we'll try to get past that. But tonight, as you alluded to, Sean, we're going to be talking about the hybrids. Greek mythology, it's referred to as a chimera, which is a fire-breathing female monster with a lion's head, a goat's body, and of course, a serpent's tail, otherwise known as the ex-wife.
Yes.
And also, yeah, there you go. I'm sorry that might have hit too close to home for Vance. I apologize. Take that back. It's also a thing that is hoped or wished for, but in fact is illusory. I probably just said that wrong, or impossible to achieve. So I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. But anyway, what is that really? What does that mean to us now? So a chimera leads into our topic today, which are hybrids. And what I liked about this topic, and I think Sean had mentioned it too, is it's not something he's touched in all of his experience. Keep your hands to yourself, Sean. But it's something that he hasn't really covered.
No
and
promises.
Even though, yeah, keep it covered, buddy. What's good about it is that, on this show, we're going to be touching on a lot of our favorite topics, Bigfoot, aliens, ghosts, things that we can debate if they're real or not. There is an open argument whether we believe them or not. However, this is indisputable. It's based on fact from the past, the present, and the future. This topic is going to give us an opportunity to learn, to think, and to discuss things from both an emotional and a pragmatic standpoint. It's something that's very hot button right now, but as you'll see, it dates back years and years and years and years. And it's crazy because it's one of those things that decades ago would seem like fiction, and even today kind of looks strange, but we're creeping more and more towards tomorrow, and tomorrow's today. So we're going to kind of dissect it, and I'm going to try to move us along in a linear motion. So I just wanted to start real quick with our first main topic. As you heard in the intro, we're going to talk about probably the most well-known case of what could have been in Stalin's ape army. So gentlemen, if you'll allow me, which I think you will because I already threatened you, I'm just going to go through this quick little background for our listeners. And as always, this is just as brief as I can be, really, because I'm sure some things will pop up on Google that you won't like. Hopefully nothing else pops up. But
Ding, ding.
Heyo, I'm here all week, ladies and gentlemen. So those who know me know that I love the original 68 Planet of the Apes, starring Charlton Heston, Roddy McDowall, Kim Hunter, and Maurice Evans. Although, it's considered purely science fiction, it almost came close to being science fact. Those know the Soviet dictator, Joseph Stalin. He had his heart way back when, many, many moons ago, on creating an entire ape army of ape-human hybrids, or an entire army of ape-human hybrids. And this was unearthed due to fairly recently unclassified documents. According to him, he longed for an army with the intelligence of a man and the brute strength and mobility of apes. He was quoted as saying, and I quote, his quote, "I want a new and invincible human being, insensitive to pain, resistant and indifferent about the quality of the food they eat." So that's something that we could talk about entirely. But basically in 1926, at the peak of the Soviets' desire for a 5-year plan, with the purpose of fast-tracking industrialization, there was a request passed to the Academy of Science. They wanted to build this living war machine, as they put it. So given this unenviable and possibly immoral task was Ilya Ivanovich Ivanov. I'm probably going to say that a couple more times. I wish I really didn't have to.
Don't
Why
hurt
his name
yourself.
couldn't be... Yeah, oh, I already did. Why his name couldn't be like Derek Smith or something, I don't know. Maybe it's because he's Soviet. But he was a highly regarded scientist who first established his reputation under the Tsar back in 1901. He accomplished this by creating the world's first center for the artificial insemination of racehorses. Again, if you want to Google that, definitely be careful. On the merit of his prior work, he was given a staggering $200,000 and sent to West Africa with orders to impregnate female chimpanzees with human sperm. To be a fly on that wall. Concurrently, there was a center set up in Georgia that was in the Soviet, not Georgia here, although maybe there is one too, with the intention of being basically a safe haven where they could bring these ape humans or these pregnant apes back to raise. Unfortunately, the doctor's attempts at hybridization were unsuccessful. So in 1929, he moved over from Africa back to the Soviet Union with his proverbial, but unfortunately not physical, tail between his legs. There, they made a last-ditch effort by trying to have human volunteers receive sperm samples from male chimps. So if it doesn't work that way, the pieces can fit the other way. Again, you can Google that. That will definitely come up with some things you might or might not want to see. And then in a very last-ditch effort, he basically attempted to get some monkeys from a Cuban heiress, but somehow the story leaked to the New York Times, which I don't see why it wouldn't. I think that story would be pretty leaky today. And as a result, she decided not to go ahead with it. Due to these repeated failures, he was basically deemed himself an ultimate failure. And as such, he was exiled with Borat to Kazakhstan, which was not very nice. Oh, I like a monkey, I like a sex, and then he passed away in 1931. I like that transition. It was very natural. He's dead. Yeah, and then he died. But right, like a year before that, they got more chimps, but it was too late because they already basically cut out the science budget and said, no, thank you. You've had enough chance. I just don't think they might have played enough Barry White. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of throw it to you guys because that brings up a lot of questions. I'm sorry I went on such a long rant, but I think the background was essential. Hopefully we had fun along the way. What say you gentlemen about monkeys and apes and humans and sex?
The human pansy, or human pansy. You know, what is the possibility? What if the possibility that one of these experiments actually took? That in with itself is kind of a scary thought. It would not probably exist today just for a lack of, breeding population. But what if something like that actually happened? I forget the name now that you brought it up, but the name of that famous chimpanzee that was
Oliver.
Oliver, thank you very much. Very kind of creepy when you watch those videos. I mean, he gained world-renowned stardom just because of that fact. And, of course, at that time, everything was done on film camera, so there was no photoshopping. But he had an entire history behind him, and the personality and the fact that this creature only walked bipedally is kind of creepy. And who's to say that something like that may not have been generated from a secret program like that? I don't know. It's a little hair-raising, no pun intended. Very true.
God rest his soul, and amazing creature. But how is it that he resembles a human? He's an ape that resembles a human, and he becomes famous and people love him. But I'm a human that resembles an ape, and people can't stand me. I don't understand. Maybe you can.
Oliver didn't talk, Maz. That's where.
Oh, Matt's sad. Back to the corner.
That's the first thing I thought of when I thought of hybrids is Oliver. And of course they say Oliver was just a genetic mutation. Mm-hmm. And nothing really out of the ordinary with Oliver, but was there? We don't know. And like I just tongue-in-cheek said, curious villagers, we're in the 21st century and people are now still getting busted for banging animals. So it's not really out of the realm of human behavior.
Sorry, Sean, did you say bagging, like hunting, or
banging?
Did you say like banging?
Banging.
That's a very that's a choice verb you chose.
Well,
you didn't go delicately into that.
I'm not going to go delicately into this topic. This topic's kind of bizarre, and we talked off yesterday that this was probably going to be a little uncomfortable for people because there's a lot of, and we're going to get into that in the second part of the program, so we're not going to go too far down this rabbit hole, but, moralistically, and, it's a very gray area upon which we're treading in this ability to create new types of life. And Oliver is just the first thing I happen to think of. And it's not the first, instance of this. When I think of that, I also think of Quint, if you remember the Almasty stories of the female Bigfoot that was taken over in Russia. And she was, supposedly gently used by village men and created
gently
these,
used.
Not I've never heard it put that way.
No.
Gently used. What are you trying to resell her on Amazon?
No. Well, apparently they did. And they created these offspring that were, strong-jawed and much different than everyone else. Very hairy beings. And there's, I guess, skeletal evidence. But again, you look into the DNA, it's not much different from people. And when you add people into the equation, does it really contaminate that much of the DNA where it's inseparable from humanity? Perhaps the reason why it is so close to us is because they're not realizing the fact that it is more us than we're comfortable at admitting.
Well, during the specific time when Oliver was actually making all this public statement and coverage and fascination and magazine stories, science was looking at this creature at this time, but with the technology then. If they had the technology we have today, those answers might be a lot more definitive. and because then you would have more of an understanding of how the entire system was working and the dynamics of it at that time. With a dead species and you're pulling DNA, you don't have as much information to work with to answer those questions as to, was this just a genetic mutation that happened by nature, or was there some sort of outsource influence to create this Oliver creature? And the same thing that happened in Russia.
Absolutely.
Was there an outsource interjection, so to speak, to create this, or is this just an undiscovered species and it propagated with humans and had offspring?
Well, I went over to Oliver's Wikipedia page quick just to see, and Travis, we'll let you jump in here because we've been hogging the mic. I'm sorry. Oliver was much more attracted to human females over chimpanzee females, which I find very interesting because that often doesn't, really happen. But it became so problematic. He actually tried to mate with one of his handlers, and she had to sell him to a New York attorney. Perhaps, maybe, he was a little bit more chimp.
Travis, what's your thought?
Well, one thing I find really interesting about this is you look at the fact that hybridization does occur outside of us actually creating it. So, but when that tends to happen, when I don't think we're nearly as unsettled, then you start to get humanity involved, and you look at what Stalin wanted to do, and you think about what that kind of army would look like. You think about the kinds of ways that would change the entire world. And it's interesting just the kind of horrors we can potentially create. Another interesting thing with that army is that scientist, good old, I'm just going to use his last name, Ivanov. That's easier. That's right. Interestingly enough, with him, there are 3 potential motives given for why he wanted to do this specifically. Obviously, at the time in 1926, the Bolshevik thing was really big. But potential motives were either wanting to create a socialist utopia through positive eugenics. That was one possibility. Another was just to prove Darwin right regarding the origin of the species. And one of the more far-fetched ones, according to the article I read at least, was to actually provide rejuvenation treatments for the Kremlin. But the one that's widely accepted is that he was actually trying to create a socialist utopia through the use of eugenics. And when you look at what Stalin was calling for, I don't think that's too far-fetched.
A scary point, too, is what if any of that actually transpired and you did have an ape army? Nobody at that time with their desires ever takes a look at the long-term effect. Right. And what would become in the year 2019 if there was such a thing? And these creatures are still in existence, but not being used as an army. Are they let loose? So what are the dynamics of what becomes way down the road? And unfortunately, people that are involved in this really need to take a long, hard look at the long-term effects. And I'm not going to get on a soapbox, but, FDA seems to do this with a lot of drugs. Oh, they'll approve the drug, but then, 10, 15, 20 years later, there's these crazy side effects. You need to take a look at the long-term effect. What are the possibilities, and have a think tank put in place before you try to initiate any type of program like that.
I think you really have to, put ourselves in the perspective of the times. Somebody wanted to have the best weapon first, right? And if you couldn't develop a big booming bomb that could wipe out a force, let's create a army that's virtually indestructible. It's no mistaking the fact, and I don't really know how they know this then, but the strength of these animals were far superior than us, right? Chimpanzees are far stronger by their body size than we are. Just imagine the force he thought he was going to create, and I don't believe, because of the limitations at the time, they understood how difficult it was going to be. And could you imagine what would happen if he was successful with the project? That in itself is just mind-blowing.
There would be a lot of faceless people because these, the thing about animals is they can be totally unpredictable. I mean, we saw a few years ago the story about the woman who had a chimp that she, raised from a little chimp all the way to being an adult, and he just snapped on her and ripped her face off. And of course, we don't know what kind of result would come out of this hybridization. What kind of traits would it have of a human? What kind of traits would it have of a man? I mean, in a perfect world, you would have I guess what he would have hoped for, and I hope I'm not speaking for Mr. Stalin, but you would imagine exactly. You would imagine that he would want the mental capacity, the intelligence, the intellect, the decision making of a human, but at the same time want those physical traits, the agility. He says impervious to pain, which I don't think is true. Maybe he just feels like humans would care too much about pain, or do care too much about pain, but at least have their strength, their agility, their speed, all of those good things, the dexterity. They still have opposable thumbs, so they could probably still use guns, right? But it's like kind of the best of both worlds. And then the interesting aspect for me out of all of that was the food part, because that's one of the things that like we take for granted. We don't even think about when we're talking about an ape army, is like, hey, these guys would eat poo and be happy. They'd probably fling poo too. Which would change warfare in a way, but a white flag would be toilet paper. What about you guys? Yeah, exactly. Duck.
Well, yeah, and that's pretty interesting point. But here's another dynamic to look at is the way society has developed over the years. Now, what do you have to grant these creatures civil rights? Are they just subject to murder? Are they just as subject to crime and be put on trial? And have those trials executed as it would in the human race. These are all things that nobody really thought about. What is the civil rights involvement? Because there would be an uprising of, okay, this is cruel and this is not right. So we have to protect these animals somehow. Well, what do? If there's any human DNA involved in these creatures, you've got to give them civil rights. You might have to give them land. Who knows? I mean, you're opening Pandora's box, and God knows what'll come out of that whole thing.
Will you leave Pandora alone? Jeez.
Yeah. Again with Pandora's box.
Anyhow, and all serious on this, I think you'd have to really tread carefully there, because you would literally start a real Planet of the Apes situation. You really would, which would be frightening in itself, particularly if they had the set of skills they think. I go to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, where they create Toka and Razar, and they come out to be these fierce-looking creatures, and they have infant brains. And Shredder's so pissed off about it. Like, I could see Stalin, like, standing before his giant ape army, and they just start flinging their poo, and he's like, eradicate them. I could just see it being a big mistake.
Like young Frankenstein. Oh man, well I guess we're lucky we live in a world today where we don't have to worry about cleaning our windows off, from poo and dodging. Just think about it; it'd be pretty crazy. And you gotta wonder, like, speaking of Planet of the Apes, did Pierre Abul get that idea from that, or it's a real.
There's a potential.
Yeah. I mean, it's a real chain reaction. We can't say for sure. I'm grateful it happened, and I'm grateful that this didn't happen. But did you guys stumble upon any other examples through your research of attempted or successful hybridization? I'm going to keep the modern stuff for later, but I don't know if you guys found any other examples you want to touch on from years past.
I did myself. Yeah. I came across a species. They tried to blend human and reptilian DNA, or I should say amphibian, to create sort of frog people, which are kind of the picture for our episode. It was not successful, as you can tell. And this happened in France, I believe.
Oh, God, don't eat the frog legs.
Don't eat the frog. And it did not go well. But I can't find the article that I had for it. I saved it, and it's just not loading, so maybe the government got wind of it and shut it down before I could go back. Because that would make sense. But I didn't find anything else besides, there's tons of articles really about the Stalin and the Ape Man, because it's been really popular over the last couple of years, ever since Monster Quest did that episode about it. Stalin's Ape Man, it really took off.
It's one of my favorite shows, actually. It's a really great show, Monster Quest.
Yeah, I wish I would come back. Maybe we need to start a Monster Quest and pick up that ball and carry, because I enjoyed that show too. The funny thing is they never find the creature at the end of the show, so it's always that disappointment, but it's still fun to watch until the very end. The only other thing that I found it dates into history, but not that far back. We're talking the mid-1960s. If that's far back enough for you guys, I don't know. But it was in lore and in conspiracy only. There has been no tangible proof. But from Lauren Coleman's book, Cryptozoology A through Z, we talk about one creature that was a hybrid and may possibly have been created in a lab in the great southwest of America. There was a use of the Dulce base in New Mexico, and quite possibly they had created this creature known as the Chupacabra, and it made its way and went down. And of course, there was a bad B-rated movie made of this whole thing, but there was that seed that this could have possibly have happened, that there was experimentation for the same reason that Stalin was trying to create an ape army, was what type of animal creature can we work on that would have this mentality to destroy and yet be containable and tameable enough. So I think that's where really the whole cycle of the Chupacabra came about from, and all these reports and sightings, because a lot of the original reports were all sharing the same similar physical descriptions from these witnesses. It's only been over a period of time more recently into history where the description has changed and it's more dog-like. But the original Chupacabra, kind of a creepy looking animal, very creepy looking animal with big spikes and very elongated front forearms and so on. So maybe there was some sort of experimentation going on militarily, or a subcontractor of the military working on DNA projects, and this thing just happened to, make outside the gates and took off. Fortunately, there's no breeding population, so I would be certain that if that did happen, this creature would not be able to propagate and reproduce, because that might be a scary situation within itself. And then the only other thing, which is sort of in the same realm, was back in the 1950s, mid-1950s, was the hybridization of ticks and mosquitoes as a biological weapon. And they were hybrided to be able to live longer and carry these pathogens. They started with certain pathogens, and it was believed that Lyme disease was one of the pathogens as an experiment. And there is an ongoing investigation through Congress right now to get more verification to the fact, was this program actually happening, and some of these little buggers managed to not be contained properly. And of course, once you take a mosquito that has a pathogen, it breeds rather quickly and could be, potentially dangerous to the public. Again, it's a weaponized creature. We all seem to see the same thread here, that these creatures seem to be created for weaponization.
What about you, Travis? Did you find anything, or is there anything you want to go off of that that Vance just touched on?
I didn't personally find anything, but I am really right now grappling with that fascinating idea and fact that so often we're doing this to weaponize, and I'm thinking, why is that immediately what we go to? Why is that the only thing we go to? I'm sure, as we'll talk later on, that there are other things we could use this type of hybridization for. But it's very interesting how, especially during times of war, when you don't seem to have the soldiers you want around you, you're like, what else can I do? And you know that somebody somewhere in the past just got bored. It had to happen. There had to be one guy who was like, I don't know what to do. Oh, I have an idea.
Bad.
But it's really, I don't know. I'm trying to wrap my head around that it always is weaponization, but it is.
I think what's cool, and obviously, this is going to be aired with the intro and all that. You guys haven't heard the intro that I wrote and recorded for the show, but you actually, Travis, and the rest of you guys, you've been touching on some of the things that I brought up. And Travis, what you just mentioned about like why war, is that what the ultimate goal is, or that's something I kind of touched on. Do we have pure intentions or bad intentions? And I think that's something that we're going to grapple with shortly, and really get into now that we've kind of got the history out of the way, we're going to get into the philosophical and kind of modern day. And I'm looking forward to talking about that. But I think that's also a sexier idea when like a human is involved, not sexy like turned on, but sexy, exciting, interesting. When you're talking about ticks and mosquitoes, like it's a scary thought because they're already dangerous enough. Let's take the two biggest, tiniest sons of baskets and get them together. And it's scary thinking that we can be infected by an enemy we can't see, but it's not as exciting. When you talk about apes, humans, or humans, frogs, I mean, it's just your mind goes crazy. Yep, ribbit, exactly. There you go. What I find interesting about what Travis is hitting on, what Vance you hit on, and Sean is Sean's heard it, but you guys, as of right now, even though this is playing with the intro, they have not heard the intro except for Sean and myself that I wrote and recorded. But one of the things that I touched on was what Travis just hit on, was about why war? Is that really what we want out of this? That always seems to be the common denominator. And I'm looking forward to, in the second half, kind of getting into it more from a morality standpoint, the subject, and modern day, because now we're looking at it through a much different lens. Back then, social norms were much different, especially in Soviet Russia. Now everything is looked through this lens of being offended and is it right, is it wrong? So to me, that's going to be the real interesting part to dig into. Now that we've kind of got a history down pat, we can now bring it forward, look at where we are today and where we're heading in the future.
No, absolutely. And we're going to catch on that right after this social media message. Listeners, we pride ourselves on being socially active. We encourage you to join up with us online to stay up to date on the latest information regarding the show, to connect with the host, to see what our opinions are on the latest movies, TV shows, or other forms of media. Just an all-around great community to join up with so you can also enjoy the Super Normal. Check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/SuperNormalCast. Same on Instagram, SuperNormalCast. Or go to Twitter at SuperNRML. Connect with us and experience the show in a way you haven't before. We look forward to connecting with you. And yes, folks, we are socially active. So before we went on break, we were talking about the moral and social ramifications of hybridization. And Maz, let's pick up where we left off.
Yeah, so I want to bring it back from Soviet Russia, back in the early turn of last century, to current day and what's going on now. So the big thing in the news is that the human cells are being injected into pig embryos. And overall, the idea, and that's bacon I don't want a part of, the idea is to see how human cells act and grow inside of a non-human. This you can look up on YouTube. You could look at videos. You can read articles. But according to, I believe his name is Jun Woo, I apologize. The ultimate goal of this research is essentially to see if we can use this technology to generate artificially, through these means, human tissue or organs, ideally to grow an organ inside of a pig. To achieve gene editing is currently being used. Basically what that is they'd go into let's say the pig embryo, which is exactly what they're doing. They take out the little sequence that would say, oh, this is the pig's heart. They'd inject the human sequence for a heart in there, basically fill up that gap, seal it in, and then they'd put the embryo back into the mom. And as of right now, the embryo is allowed to develop from what I found. I don't know if you guys read into this or saw this, for 28 days legally. Legally, it can develop for 28 days. It's not yet allowed to be brought to full term. Why or anything past that, I don't know.
So that's longer than I thought. I was under the impression it was only 14 days, but so they may have doubled it depending on the time the study was written.
That's true.
Actually, the Chinese government has extended that to bring it to full term, but there's limitations to that to extinguish it after it is at full term, and that is of, I believe, like a month and a half ago.
Wow.
That was the news item.
There you go.
And again, this isn't a demonstrative thought process. What you brought up, Maz, he has, and I'm speaking of the doctor that's involved in this, he has a biography behind him that was motivated by personal tragedy and family loss. And if he could only have saved some members from these horrible diseases that humankind face, and that was his driving motivation to say, instead of sacrificing a person or a donorship once a person is tragically killed, it is hard to farm out what organs could match a specific patient that is in need that might be dying from a disease. So he was looking into the fact of, can we do this and have a sacrificial animal that will host it grow a human organ and then use that as the transplant. I understand that. There is motivation on a positive side. However, the mainstream media paints it as this is Dr. Frankenstein and he's just looking to do this to create another creature. That's not the motivation behind it. It was strictly motivated behind all this tragedy that he had faced, and he wanted to be on the cutting edge of this new research to see. And that is why China opened up the book and reviewed everything. There's still limitations to it, but let's take it one step at a time, and has extended to bring it to term, but must be terminated once it is to term, and then they will review and see what is actually transpired in this growth. It needs to be taken at a very slow pace because once again, we need to look way down the road, 50 years from now. If a human has a pig heart, not adapted to human disease, you may have all sorts of craziness that happens. You really need to once again build that think tank and look at all the different little nuances that aren't thought of yet. What could possibly happen if we do this? And that is important. Let's take a look down the road first before we really go ahead and do clinical trials on people.
Well,
and see what happens first.
And Sean, I'm going to get to you in a second. I just want to touch on a few things I want to finish real quick. And Vance, I'm actually glad you said that, because you said a few things that are interesting. The first of which is, whereas what we talked about at the beginning in regards to Stalin's army, that was looking to take lives. What we're talking about here is possibly to save lives. And I do want to touch on, is this moral? Does it do more harm than good? What are the benefits? What are the cons? Is it worth the risk? Where do you see it taking us? But one thing you did mention was about pig hearts. And, I work in cardiology. A lot of the patients we see have had valves replaced. And one of the options for valve replacement is actually with a pig's valve. However, once a valve is replaced, they are susceptible to infections, and once an infection gets in that valve, it's done for. And it's not always so easy to remove that valve. So there is precedent already for body parts being replaced with, body parts from other animals. So that's a whole separate issue.
I was going to make that same point.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry, Sean. I just wanted to get that in there, but whoever else wants to go. But this is really where we're going to kind of get into it. And I just find it funny because that little rundown you said where he was motivated, he lost a life, and now he wants to create and save lives. It sounds like the beginning to a horror movie, literally.
Sounds like the beginning of Frankenstein.
Yeah, yes. Exactly. But Sean, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to steal anything that you were going to say.
No, I completely agree with you, and I was going to make up that point, and I think Van's fully aware of that we're already using animal parts. I think the bigger issue here is that we are using, for this particular purpose, animals as vessels for human parts. We're not using that part of the animal anymore. We're now using that animal to be the host of a human-grown part. So at what point are we sacrificing the body of a creature created for the specific purpose to die for harvesting of an organ? And that starts to get a little bit more gray on the ethical scale. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying from the standpoint, what gives us the right to make that determination and to play God in that instance. And to your point, with these parts, just because it's a human part grown inside an animal doesn't mean there's not unforeseen consequences later. I think the point what we're looking at is the ability to take our own physical, you, me, Vance, Maz, Travis, like our parts, to take our DNA, infuse it into the cells of a host, and grow body parts for ourselves later on down the road where, Forker's had too many Tom Collins over the years. He needs a new liver. Let's put it into Babe, and 5 more years when Forker's not suffering, we'll cut it out and give Forker the his own grown liver back and turn Babe into tomorrow night's supper.
Well, if you need a new stomach, does that make it pork belly?
Pork belly.
Oh, jeez. I can't do it because I'm Jewish. It's not kosher. Travis, what do you think?
Yeah, I was looking at this, wondering about these organs grown in animals versus 3D printed organs. And a quick Google search gave me an answer as to why we wouldn't just go with 3D printed organs. The holdup with 3D printed organs right now, and you might have some idea of this too, Maz, given where you work, is the fine networks of blood vessels that are required to keep those things alive. So that's part of the reason that you gravitate toward the idea of animal experimentation as opposed to 3D printed organs. Now, that being said, Sean, a great point about how different it is to experiment on an animal to cure some disease by injecting some type of genetic material into them versus just turning them into a flat-out host body, not even trying to dress it up at all and saying, you are here just for me, just for the purpose of growing more things to keep me alive. It is very interesting and ethically gray. Another thing to look at is, Vance, you mentioned the positive motivation that this guy had for experimenting to try to grow these things in pigs. And what's interesting is to look at the potential ramifications of that apart from his motivation. His motivation, yes, was love-driven and grief-driven, and it was to help people. What's interesting is when you start to look at what Big Farm can do with this down the road and how much more money they can put into their pockets with something like this if they say, well, you can have any organ you want now that we're doing this. So it's really a fascinating, interesting quagmire.
It is. And where do you stop? What animals will you stop at? Are you only going to be limited to pigs? Now, understand that, the pork market is a commodity and it is traded on Wall Street. Humans have always used livestock for self-contained and, sustenance and keeps us going and alive and its desire. And that was the argumentative point to say, well, why don't we use this same animal to create this for the human race? And I think you're starting to expand a lot more outside the initial boundaries that were designed for these animals to begin with. And now you will get a lot of uprising on probably both sides of the aisle politically to say, you know what, this is kind of going a little bit further than what we really wanted it to go to begin with.
No, I think the most interesting thing I came across in regards to this whole conversation of morality and is it right or wrong or what should we do or not should we do was when they were interviewing this one doctor, I think it was Dr. Wu, the one I mentioned before, and they asked him, well, what happens if a cell migrates into the brain of the pig and all of a sudden the pig thinks it's a human? Like, what if that human consciousness is in a pig? Like that human, so to speak, from its mind will freak out. And then I watched a separate video where somebody brought up the point of, like, look at Big Bird for an example, oddly enough. Today's show is brought to you by the letter H for hybrids, by the way. But he's kind of like a human bird kind of creature. And for the bird, that's freaking awesome. I can walk, I can talk, I'm seeing things that I don't know about, snuffleupagus. But from the human standpoint, he's got to feel like an abomination. So, of course, thus far, none of these cells, apparently, from what I saw or what the interviews I watched, have had this happen where they haven't got into the brain stem or any part of the brain. But that, to me, is the most interesting part. Like, you can look at it from both points of view. What if that happens? And I think what it boils down to in the end is, you might be opposed to it until it becomes personal, right? Who knows? Maybe this guy was against this, and then it became personal. So our opinions are forever changing.
Absolutely, and I think that's the stellar point to be made of all this. It's a moot point until we need it, and then we realize this works, and now all of a sudden it's the new designer genes, To the point of consciousness, Maz, I'm a little bit more concerned as how we define it. Where does it come from? And is consciousness what defines our humanity? I think many different beings have consciousness. I think we have an evolved form of communication from our consciousness. Now, with that being said, how much DNA from a human put into another animal defines its humanity? That's where we, really have to grasp. Is it 1% that makes it human? If that... it still, even with our consciousness, it still wouldn't be able to communicate because its anatomy is different than ours. The reason why we talk is because our vocal cords are designed the way they are. So how would it communicate? You can't teach a pig sign language because it doesn't have that many, digits. So it would be very hard to discern that. We'd have to find a common language to communicate with said animal. Perhaps that's already happened through this manipulation, and we don't know. It's concerning and confusing to me. Like, not even trying to be religious, but is consciousness really our essence and our spirituality that makes us ethereal at some point when our mortal coil has expired? Like, I just don't know. We start asking some pretty philosophical questions. We can go deep down the rabbit hole. Are we confusing consciousness with soul? And at what point in the DNA is the soul created? I don't know.
I don't know if I agree with you, Sean, because if you ask Danielle, she'd probably tell you I sound like a pig sometimes when I snore. Might have to look into that sleep study. I might have an apnea-hypopnea index of about 60. But and I wanted to harken back real quick to something Vance said, which also feeds into that point, Sean, is this kind of misconception of like science fiction kind of thing going on. You know, when we saw these articles, because when we were talking about what show topics we want to do, and I was like, hey, we should do hybrids, Vance said, oh yeah, I just posted that article about it, and subconsciously I was like, oh yeah, he did. Maybe that's kind of what was in my head, because but when you look at the article, like the headings to these articles, it says like hybrids, and what are our thoughts automatically? Half, 50%, right down the middle, black and white cookie, pig. That's a gross cookie. And human, not the real black and white cookie. That's delicious. It's an American treasure. And don't you say a bad word about it, gentlemen. But, really, if you're only taking one aspect, I mean, it's the percentage of human to pig or what have you is very small. So that's why there's already this guttural reaction when you hear like, oh, they're doing hybridization with humans and pigs. Like you literally think there's like a Dr. Moreau thing going on.
Mm-hmm.
There's some kind of man-bear pig. South Park style thing running around. But really, when you find out, oh, they're just trying to grow a liver inside of a pig, you're like, oh, all right, that's avoided.
And that was that is the calling of what mainstream media was doing. They need to be the first to get that story out, so they make it a horrifying headline to draw your attention to it. And unfortunately, that is the case for a lot of mainstream media, to paint that picture of horror first, because that will attract the human attention. What we need to really take a good look at is when you gentlemen are speaking about the manipulation to transplant this into a living creature, we are strictly talking about, and I haven't been in a lab myself to see this, but typically, as the research is, it's limited to only stem cell. We're not talking about anything else other than stem cell. And stem cell carries that information that is important to development. That's where the DNA is coming in at. My point, and I'm not going to go too far off subject here, if there is a manipulation in the DNA strand that we are able to do, and it can be manipulated to another creature, and it actually develops, it started me down this path of thinking the fact that what if there is a creature that does not have that one tiny bit of information in its DNA strand, and if it were to propagate with a creature unrelated to it, would it actually create a new creature? And then that took me down the whole cryptid thing between a Bigfoot and a Dogman. And who's to say that maybe Bigfoot doesn't have that one dot of information in its DNA strand that would allow it to interbreed with another species, and you have a cold winter night, and Sasquatch is looking at a female wolf, and next thing you know, you might have a Dogman. Maybe that's some of that creepy stuff too. And I know that's an entirely different show, but it's something to think about, because if you are able to manipulate DNA that way and have an organ grown in this creature, it's quite possible that maybe nature had that prior, and that's where some of these cryptid encounters are coming from. It's just a thought.
It's an uncomfortable one. I don't deny that, and I think at the end of the day, we all have to rest on the fact that none of us are genetic experts, right? I think as humans, we have this undying need to anthropomorphize things. I stuttered there. I lisped anthropomorphize, but we do. We have to make things like us for us to be comfortable with it. I think we've done the same thing with hybrids. Hybridization happens in nature by accident. Travis, you alluded to that a little earlier. Not necessarily through nefarious ways. So I think we have to... I'm on the wait and see bench on some of this, to be honest with you. I try to put my own reservations aside in the hopes that science is doing the right thing. But we always know science isn't pure, and it's dictated by the people performing the experimentation, and if they're acting in a way that's considered ethical by their peers. It's a slippery slope. What's to stop somebody from going to create the next race of super apes or ape men? Who's to say they haven't done it already? And who's to say that these cryptid-like creatures that are being seen aren't the direct results of years upon years upon years of genetic manipulation of known species? I don't know. This whole subject's fascinating. We're not going to cover it in just one episode because it goes down, Vance and Maz, like you said, down so many different rabbit holes, we'd never come back to the point. It really goes deep. On the principle of whether we should be doing this, you know, that personal need, guys, is a strong motivator. I think a lot of science has been driven, at least medical research, by a personal tragedy, and a lot of good things have come from it. So I don't think we can be too off-put by the potential that could save many, many lives. And we have to deal with the ramifications as they become apparent.
Yeah, Travis, I just want to have you, if you could comment a little bit on this topic, and then what we'll do, I think, is we'll just run down and talk about true blood, known factual hybrids. I think we'll have some fun with that, and then we'll kind of just give all of our final thoughts. But Travis, what do you want to? I know you want to talk about a little bit ethical, from an ethical point of view.
Right. Now, I can't say one way or the other exactly where I fall on this one. I thought I could coming into tonight, but like Sean said, I'm sure what we all did was we put aside our preconceived notions and we listened to each other, and that's what we do here. It's great. And what I've come to realize is that as much as I wanted to be like, oh, this is horrible, this is wrong, Vance, when you talk about that man who just wanted to help people because of what happened to him, you realize that it's not all about creating ape armies like Stalin or creating some highly weaponized animal. That the motivation can be positive, but then the question becomes, when does it not become that? When does that open door lead down the slippery slope that Sean mentioned? And when do we get to a point where we have to start seriously considering, if it were to happen with a hybrid, start to seriously consider when an animal or a hybrid being gains a human-like consciousness? At what point do we grant them rights? What rights do they have? Who's to say they shouldn't have rights? And then, on the other hand, we eat meat. Many of us do, and not all of us eat it just for sustenance. I can attest to that. I sometimes eat meat just for fun. So I don't know where I fall on it, but I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think there's a lot to consider moving forward. I'm going to sit on the bench with Sean and see how it all falls.
Well, I just want to say, guys, I think I fell out of Pandora's box and right into a think tank, down the slippery slope and into a rabbit hole. Send the search party. Oh, is Baker's down here? Holy crap, the whole time. Oh, boy. No, that's a great point. Yeah, and I think one thing I wanted to bring up before we jump into this next section is just that, we can be accused of being hypocritical because sure, oh no, pigs have rights, we have no right to, and I'm not saying one way or the other, I'm just playing devil's advocate or pointing out, the obvious points here. We could say, we shouldn't be able to just toy with a pig and throw our organs in them and whatever. But, let me just, put down my hamburger for a second to tweet my angry tweets about it, and I'm sure there are people that aren't like that, but that's the way society is. We don't always see the big picture. We look through tunnel vision. But with that being said, I just wanted to go around, and I don't know if you guys found any, but it's really cool to Google real hybrids. A lot of these things I was like, really? Some of them I've heard of. Some of them I didn't. I thought maybe I'd name a few and see if you guys know what they are or can give a guess. You guys down?
Yep, go.
Yeah, go for it.
We're going to play Name That Hybrid, where you have to do what it says in the title, name that freaking hybrid. Let's go with let's start with an easy one. You guys, can you guess what a Zorse is?
Oh, I can.
All right, you with the earlobes.
Sugar lobes. Is it a zebra and a horse?
Is it a zebra and a horse? Show me zebra and a horse. Bing! It's a zebra and a horse. Oh wow!
Damn it!
Did that? Oh man, we did not discuss this at all. Who did? I'm kind of creeped out now that you knew that. Just for the people listening, I did not say that I was going to do it this way. I just said I was going to name some. Now here we'll start with another easier one. How about a walfin? All right, what is
walrus
that?
and a dolphin.
No, but good guess. That would be.
I want to see a walrus and a dolphin.
My librarian.
That's what I want to see.
In elementary school, looked like that. A walrus and a dolphin. Anybody else want to guess what a walfin is?
I want to say a false killer whale and a bottlenose dolphin.
I call that, but that's exactly what it was. It's a pretty. I don't know what a false killer whale is. Why we got to accuse the thing? Let it be what it needs to be, you know. But yeah, that's exactly correct. It's also really cool looking. Now we're gonna get into one that's natural. This is naturally found. This is not a hybrid, birth of science. I'm gonna throw this one to Travis. See if Travis, if you can get this one.
All right.
Do you know what a growler bear is?
Grizzly and a polar bear.
Yes,
I saw a couple of those online there.
Thank you. Yes. Very good. Travis gets 5 imaginary don't count for nothing points. Maz bucks.
Yes.
Redeemable at your local garbage. So apparently it's really another really cool looking thing, and it's if you believe it's real or you don't believe it's real, they say that it's from climate change. It's basically their environments are kind of intercepted, and sometimes that white bear likes that brown bear. It happens. Christian mingle.
Very well.
All right. Let's see if I got another one. All right, this one's really hard. I really don't know if any of you are smart enough to get this. Yeah, not to me though. Anybody want to guess what a wolf dog is?
I'm stumped.
Nobody wants to guess what a wolf dog is.
I can't even fathom.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, it is part seahorse and part amoeba. So whoever guessed that, you're correct. Put a point down. No, it is. Guess what? It's actually part wolf. And anybody want to guess? It rhymes with frog and starts with a D and is DOG. What's?
Oh, hog. Our dog.
All right. Sean's 3 sheets to the wind, and yet he doesn't have any sheets on him. He's completely naked.
I don't wear sheets.
So
that's against
a wolf
my
dog
type.
is a. Yeah. Oh God. Yeah, we don't want to get into that political
sir.
talk. So yeah, it's part wolf, part dog. Now, I'm going to end with a couple more, and then if you guys have any, feel free to throw them at me. Not literally, because a lot of these are really big. Now, I want the specific, because there's 2 versions of this, so I'm going to give you the 2 versions. And if you guys have seen Napoleon Dynamite, this is a real thing that they mention in there. A liger. Anybody want to try a liger? Give me the specific.
Oh,
it's a male
liger.
lion and a female tiger, right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Thank you. Put him on the board. All right. Now, what is I think this is called a tiglin or a tiglin. I don't know. Thailand, whatever you want to call it.
It's a surprise.
What is that?
Oh, that's the reverse.
So that's when you breed it, but doggy style. What you mean?
It's a male tiger and a female lion.
That's correct. Put on the board. All right.
Very good.
I have a few more, but I want to see if you guys found any adorable or disgustingly hideous ones.
Yeah, I've got an interesting one here. This is one called a Lepon, Leopon. This was apparently the breeding occurred in Japan at a park. That sounds about right.
Any relation to a tampon?
Close.
It's a
You wanna guess
leopard
what
and a
that is?
leprechaun. That's it.
So close. Yes.
Aw.
Yeah, it's male leopards and female lions actually, and it says that the body of the leopard. I'm sorry, a female leopard. The head of the lion dominates, and the body of the leopard also dominates. So it's fascinating to see this lion's head on a leopard's body. Something that'll keep me up tonight.
Hey, whatever turns you on, buddy.
And I just
Beefalo.
actually sent a picture.
Ooh, how
Oh
about
yeah,
that?
yeah, I have seen that. It is beautiful. I saw a black one too, actually.
Oh wow.
You know, yeah, they're awesome. Like it looks like a Photoshop. For those, obviously, you guys can't see at home. You should definitely Google it. That's the theme of today, brought to you by Google. But it basically looks kind of like a cheetah's body. It's got like kind of that leopard cheetah kind of stripe pattern going on, and the head too. Except it's got an orange mane. It's like if you didn't know it was real, you wouldn't think it was real. What about you, Sean? You find any?
Yeah, the Narluga.
Isn't that like a really big spit?
No, that's Narlugi.
Narlugi.
But
Narluga.
the Narluga.
Is that a narwhal and a beluga?
It is. And it's
Oh, wow.
one of the cutest
Thank you.
damn things I've seen in a long time. And it's incredibly rare, but it's been an increased sightings in North America. So they're swimming off our shores. Ladies and gentlemen, the Narluga.
So you
Well,
literally
that's because, the narwhal's horny, so.
Well, that's because it's always a sperm whale, right?
Oh, different type, Maz. Different type.
Oh, man.
I think I'm going to have to mark tonight's show as explicit.
Oh, God.
Explicitly bad.
I marked it before it started.
How about the Geep? Have you heard of the Geep?
Oh, that thing is adorable, man. I literally wrote in parentheses adorable.
Yeah. Sadly, most of them are usually stillborn, which is sad, but they are cute. Cute as a button.
It's a hybrid of a Geo and a Jeep.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a goat and a sheep.
You didn't get very far in that. No. Yes, absolutely. Another one that was really cute that I came across was God, I don't know. I have my notes here. It was a llama. What was it? A llama and a camel.
Oh, a cama.
Cama, yeah. Mm-hmm. Camato. That's you ever seen?
Yeah, I have actually. You go to Walmart quite a bit. Eventually they become moose knuckles.
I've seen the opposite. A hardy moose knuckle. I've seen from the backside. I don't know what to call that.
Oh, yeah. That's funny.
Unfortunate.
Boy.
Yeah, but those things are adorable too. There are a lot. I mean, I think, like, for me at least, I had no idea these things existed. I didn't realize that, for better or for worse, that hybrids were as prevalent as they are, or in terms of how many breeds there are.
How about our friend the zebra, or the category of zebroid, which is a zebra plus any other equine?
Zebra plus steroids.
Yeah, that zebra gets around, that's for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
Well, there is a zonkey.
Yeah.
Which is zebra donkey.
A zombie donkey.
Or zombie donkey.
There's also a hinny.
A what?
A hinny. A female donkey and a male horse creates a hinny.
I thought henny was like a fifth of henny.
Oh, I can use some henny right now.
Oh, God, I bet you. I think we've all had a little, it sounds like. Oh, man. This is a lot more, cuddly and petting zoo-like than a human lizard thing or whatever the hell is on the thing. But, yeah.
I love, like you said, tonally it changed from we're talking about these horrifying human experiments and how we're all, like, plotzing over here, and then we have... like we're talking about these lovely natural hybrid animals, and it's
cuddly little.
Yeah, it's a
except for the stillborn, Sean. You really broke the mood. I had to bring it back up. I was like,
sad.
Speaking of stillborns, I know, but that actually brings me to another topic. Is a lot of these guys are sterile or women. That it's like a one-off. So in a way, sure, it's helping, but you're also creating lives that are not going to help create other lives.
No, absolutely.
Which is, stinks. But you imagine running into some of these big cats in the wild.
Some of them are very large. Like the liger is huge.
Yeah.
I think the liger is actually the largest of any of the cats. Now, this thing is a monster. It is classified. This thing is a monster. If you haven't seen a picture of whatever this famous liger was, holy cow, man. The thing is just towering, huge. Ginormous.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's one where it's like standing up on its feet.
It's huge.
Yes. Yeah, it's huge. So huge.
And then stuff like the beefalo, that's just a terrible name, by the way.
Yes, it's horrifying. It's dinner.
There are restaurants out here by me, maybe out by you, I'm not aware of. I know out by me there are some restaurants that do serve beefalo meat. Okay,
really?
That's yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cantaloupe.
Yep.
Cantaloupe?
Cantaloupe is the alternate term for beefalo.
Yeah.
What is there was this other one I saw. Hold on, guys. I it just passed me here in the wild. I sound like Jeff Goldblum. There's a tiger, and it's
Jurassic Park. Perfect example of genetic
life will find a way, and if you inject an embryo, pretty much. There was one here. Like, I don't think this one is real. This is hybrid camel, and it's a camel with a lion's head on it. I think that's fake news, guys. Naked chicken.
Naked chicken.
Naked chicken. That's a good website. It is true. You gotta dress that chicken.
Wow.
I like
butter,
that one.
Some salt.
That was funny.
Just don't take a picture of it, because then we're talking dick pics, and
show some citrus up its canals. You get yourself a good dinner.
Seriously, there was really interesting one, and I can't find it.
Well,
so it's worse. All right, guys. Yeah, I see the hinny right here. This is how well prepared we are. There's a terrifying sculpture somebody made showing 15 hybrid animals created recently, and this is not a real thing. It looks like a mouse person.
That's horrible.
Anyway, I think what we'll do now, if you guys are agreeable, is just give our own final thoughts and do the regular shutdown here. Somebody just sent a photo. It's you guys, just to be clear.
Yeah, thank you.
What is that?
That's just creepy.
That's
What
me.
is
No.
that?
Naked chicken.
When I look at that, I just hear Brindlefly going, "Kill me, please, kill me."
Precious.
Oh my god!
All right, let me throw a stick in the spokes of the wheels here. Let's get each person's opinion. What creature would you like to see as a hybrid?
Oh yes. What would we like to see? I can't start. I'm gonna let Sean order from the menu first. Hopefully not the naked dog. So
I would like to see, literally like to see that grizzly bear, great white shark somebody memed not too long ago.
Yes.
Everybody, sharks.
Wow.
Or a rhino walrus. A rhino and a walrus. Wouldn't that be awesome to see?
That would be
Rhinolopus?
fascinating.
Would that be a sea creature or a land creature?
It would be both.
Both.
You
It's kind of a
selfish son of a
mermaidish
gun.
thing.
Yeah, that's no little. I thought the Little Mermaid was hot as a kid. That would change things.
And you know
I
what?
can see it in the seashell bra.
Listen,
Right?
if sci-fi makes a movie based off one of our hybrids, listen, we're suing, and you will pay us royalties for this.
I'm Jewish. I have lots of lawyers in my family.
Maz
not a
Goldberg,
joke.
folks. Maz Goldberg.
Well, that was my mom's maiden name, actually. No, I'm not
How
even
about
kidding.
that? That's
Yeah, it is.
hilarious.
Bill Goldberg is my uncle, by the way. You didn't know that? Okay, that part's a lie, but the first part was true. What about you, Travis? What kind of animal hybrid would you like to see if you could play God for a day?
I want to see a wolf and a woodchuck. Yes, a wolf chuck. Can you imagine the burrows that thing would dig?
I could imagine the
I
sound
just
it would
want to
make.
see it once.
How much would a wolf chuck eat if a wolf chuck could eat meat?
Yes.
What would that
exactly.
sound like, though? Oh, like, it would be horrifying.
Basically,
It
sound like my
sound like
stomach
a wolf.
as I'm eating.
Sound like a wolf in Colorado with the munchies. That's what that would sound like.
I like how you
Pretty
put Colorado. Smooth reference there.
Colorado.
Mhm.
All
That's
right.
where you would find a wolf chuck.
Exactly. Wolf Charles, by the way, is the proper name. I just want to let you guys know. But Vance, what about you?
Snorted.
For me, forget the guard dog. I want to see a Asian hornet and a tarantula. And have a flying tarantula in your house. Ain't nobody coming in. Nope. I don't care what kind of pit bull you got. No, you got a flying tarantula? Ain't nobody coming in.
I'm out. You sick
That's a
son
sequel
of a...
to the sequel to Arachnophobia.
Mm-hmm.
Air arachnophobia.
Oh, Sean! Oh, marry me,
It's our common Jewish ancestry, you know.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Did you know that I got that DNA kit for Ancestors.com and I just sent them a picture and they came back Jewish. That's why. I didn't even have to spit in the cup or nothing. It was great.
Oh, they could tell by your hairline.
Exactly, and then they sent me an offer for free 3 subscriptions, cancel anytime. So anyway, on that note, I think I would like to
donor to the Hair Club for Men.
Oh,
Thank
God.
you.
Yeah, for 15 cents a month, I can still be bald. So I think I would like to see a gorilla with some type of maybe like a gorigal, like a gorilla eagle.
Oh,
a gorilla on the move. I just think in general, like if a Pegasus was real, that would be great. Imagine like somebody complaining, "Oh, this bird just pooped on my car," and then the guy next to it is like, "A bird? That Pegasus just took a dump on my car."
that's
You
not
know,
a
like-
Pegasus.
No, it would
It's
just
a gorigal.
It's a gorigal, exactly. And then it comes and just starts beating its chest. That's some
Right.
scary stuff, man. All right. So, yeah, exactly. Or if any of our fans want to, our listeners, I don't want to say fans, want to Photoshop these, that would be fun. But
That would be great.
so in all, Sean, I'll start with you. What's your just final word on the history, the future? What's your take on the idea of hybridization?
Well, to put my final bow on things, one, I'm glad Stalin and his scientist team were not successful. I really am glad we decided to not produce our own attempt at Planet of the Apes, because I don't want to be fighting that war still to this day. As I said, it's not that I have a moral problem with it completely. I just think we have to be very careful ethically upon how we tread about using animals to sustain ourselves aside from human consumption. which is kind of selfish, but I don't know. I don't think there's any way to not be selfish about what we're doing with creatures that are presumed to be lesser than us. I mean, everything suits a purpose, right? But how far do we manipulate those purposes to be too self-serving? I don't know. And the hybrid animal stuff is just really cool. I'm kind of glad these anomalies exist in nature, and they're a lot of fun, and I would be glad to see if any of our listeners could put our hybrids together. That'd be pretty cool.
All right. How about you, Vance?
Final thoughts. I'm okay with science looking into this, but my biggest picket point is that let's put a think tank of doctors together and the intellects and see what are the possible adverse effects down the road. And yes, there are some moral ethics in which I do have problems with, but if we can help humanity and the animal society as well, and maybe combine the two together, whereas it will self-sustain itself and be able to cure diseases and replace organs in both human species and animal species. Let's just be very careful about what happens down the road, because we probably will not know the adverse effects for some years down the road to see, well, there was this tiny little mutant genetic defect, and now it's gotten out of control and we don't know how to fix it. So we have to be very careful. Travis?
Well, I'll be watching the news with a curious eye moving forward to see where we go next in the medical field when it comes to animal testing. It's curious to me that we once tried to weaponize, but then got away from that, probably in part, like you said, Vance, to the ethics. And so, like I said, I can't say where I fall on it, but I just think we had to be careful about what methods we're using to sustain ourselves, and we have to make sure that we're not doing far more harm than good to other beings with which we share this planet.
Your line there, Vance, about you humans and animals coexisting to bring it back home, kind of thing, reminds me of the final scene from Battle of the Planet of the Apes, where the Caesar statue is crying a tear of whatever you want it to be, whether it's happiness or sadness. But yeah, I think this was a fun show for me, at least. I don't know how you guys feel. I'm sure we'll talk about it after. I think it covered a wide variety of information, and we had opinions, and we kept it cordial. And I think we all are of similar mind that it's a very thin line to straddle in terms of what's right, what could we do, what should we do, and there's definitely an interesting future in it. How fast it will progress, time will only tell. I think that if we can prove that it does more good than bad, more pros than cons, people will be more understanding to it, especially those, like we said, that are affected personally. I do think it is, as we said before, a slippery slope. It depends whose hand this power gets into, and once it becomes a regular thing, and like we had mentioned before, in big pharma wants to come in and make it a business. Dollars are the bottom line. But I'm of the belief that if a spider comes in the house and I kill it, it's still a life. Who am I really to say that life is more than mine? Worth more than mine. It might sound like BS, but I really feel that way. I believe in kindness to animals because we don't know what they're thinking. We might be higher on the food chain, but are we really, more important? So I think that no matter what we do in life, there's going to be benefits, and there's going to be risks, and there's going to be rewards. But I am, like you guys, just interested to see where this goes, because for us, we're all just kind of in the passenger seat watching at this point. We're not playing a role. And speaking of roles, I've got that chicken, that naked chicken. You guys, you should look that up, the naked chicken. And on that note, I know the naked chicken thanks you guys for your time.
Thank you for coming along to this week's event. Remember, if by chance you get an odd feeling and something doesn't seem right, don't be alarmed by it. It's just the supernormal.